Welcome.
Morning. Always my pleasure.
So I'm seeing that ASP Gideon Dixon from the Police Social Welfare Association basically suggesting that, listen, we're going to follow the letter of the law. The law dictates that we are allowed to enter this particular space with said firearm. The hierarchy of the TTPS, they're saying something different. So again, the law gives a particular mandate. The courts within their, within their framework, they want a particular position. They have a position on it. And you're seeing the leadership of the TTPS suggesting, well, listen, let's follow the judicial request. But at the same time, as mentioned, Social Welfare Association President Gideon Dixon, head of the association, says his officers will not put down their guns. Couple of moving parts. Who should we really listen to in this regard, Gary? I mean, I'm thinking, are we guided by the law of the land or another framework?
Yeah, sure. Good morning. Again, it comes to leadership. So the first thing is, had I been Commissioner of Police and a junior officer, whether it be head of the Welfare Association or whatever, you make any type of statement to allude to tell police officers not to do their job, he would have been suspended for the next few years. But again, that goes with leadership. You cannot be a junior officer and try to make a comment to tell officers if you are prevented from doing something, you're not to adhere to your roster duty as stipulated by the Commissioner of Police. That is leadership. So to start with, in local parlance, he was fast and out of place to make a statement to try to influence police officers not to do their job. That is one. Two, it went totally out of sync because this should have never gone public in the first place. I had a similar situation as Commissioner of Police, and by now letting every single citizen and person know that police officers do not have firearms in the courtroom. What was there? What did you achieve by making the whole world know that? That is something that should have been dealt with behind closed doors, similar to what I would have done as Commissioner of Police when there was a rightful concern by the Welfare Association, meeting with the Office of the Chief Justice, the Judiciary, explaining our concerns, which is justified, and then trying to find an amicable solution, which is what I did then. And the solution is straightforward. It is that there are specific circumstances because the Welfare Association president, he has good grounds to be concerned because you can't have police officers. These are not simple times. These are dangerous times. We're in our darkest hour in this country. To have a police officer go into a courtroom unarmed, criminal elements, be aware of it, in a volatile situation with some hardened criminals who have been involved in serious gang activity, murders, putting hits on persons, there's a clear and present danger for these specific officers. So what was done then is what should be done now. Meeting with the Chief Justice and stating that these specific cases to allow these specific officers to be allowed to carry their firearms into the courtroom for these specific cases, or if it is that they have to carry evidence. That is what is required. The present recommendation, it is total madness. We have circumstances now that you're trying to say that you must have a full right for any police officer to carry a firearm in a courtroom. Suppose a police officer is involved in a domestic violence matter with his wife. Suppose he's involved in a divorce case with his wife. Suppose he is a prosecutor and cross-examining someone. He could intimidate the person. Suppose he's being interviewed by a state prosecutor or defense attorney who can now be intimidated. Suppose he's just a member in the public gallery. These things, it is impossible and practical for anyone, inclusive of a politician, to have the audacity to state that these people have a right to be in the courtroom. But many people, they've never gone further north than Tobago, they've never gone further east than Miaro. They don't look at international best practice. They speak, sometimes to try to win votes, to state that it is the right of the police officers to have the firearms in the courtroom. That is totally incorrect. International best practice have shown that. Recently, a Kenyan magistrate was shot by a police officer, and I'm not saying that is the reason not to do it. But the court, it must be a place where at no time, whether you're a judge, jury, a defense attorney, you must in any way feel intimidated. And let me add, I know Saddam Hussein, the member of parliament, he had to defend his political leader. He is using Section 8 of the Firearms Act to state that it gives the police the authority. That is correct. But there's a difference between authority and right. So they have the authority to carry the firearm. They do not have a right. And that is the difference. So it seems that Saddam Hussein, I don't know where they did their training in law. having the authority doesn't mean that you have a right and you can barge in anywhere to say, well, the authority gives me that responsibility. Because if that is the case, you think a police officer could put God past his thoughts to go in the U.S. Embassy and say that? You think a police officer could go in the airport authority and barge in and say, I have the authority based on Section 8? You feel he could go in the office of the Prime Minister? He can't. There will always be specific sterile locations that, even though you have Section 8 that gives you the authority to carry a firearm in the performance of your duty, you do not have the total right to carry your firearm wherever you go. And that is all. But again, as I state, there must be certain circumstances to allow the police officers to carry their firearms. I think the best option right now is to find some type of holding area to allow police officers to go into the area, have the weapon secured. They can then go into the courtroom, and then when they come out of the courtroom, they then retrieve their firearm. That is good leadership. That is how you can solve a problem. Not by making threats, not by stating that every police officer must have a firearm as if it is a shooting range. This is a court, and I think it requires a degree of patience, common sense, and communication.
So let me again put to you that you're suggesting here that the judiciary could circumvent what the law, again, what's on law, what's on paper. It's, yes, a particular mandate, but you're saying that there are certain institutions that possess a particular right to say, listen, this particular environment is a safe space, as it were, and we prefer that the firearm, based on what you're saying, needs to be lodged, whether it be at a station, whether it be as you enter the courtroom. I don't know how they're going to do this particular, the logistical part of it. But I guess going forward, based on what the judiciary is suggesting here, no more officers with firearm in holster, in their blazer, in their boots, wherever. That is going to be the new normal, the new set of rules of engagement.
No, not the new. This is what has been the practice for the last several years. And when will the level of stupidity stop? Is it that you're going to allow police officers to come in a uniform with a galleon strapped around him or a bazooka? So you cannot do it. It is not allowed. International best practice will show that, and there's a reason for that. As I mentioned several different factors. How could you think that you will allow a police officer who is a state prosecutor, who is being interviewed, who is in a civil matter with someone, who is in the witness gallery, who is in a domestic violence matter with someone, be allowed to carry his firearm in the courtroom?
I think I understand.
That is unacceptable.
I think I understand. There's a little more clarity, so I want to thank you in that regard. Before I move on to the next topic, is there a particular place where officers could lodge their firearm at this point in time?
Well, that is where dialogue should come in with the Welfare Association and the Chief Justice. I'm sure the Chief Justice, there can be some area, but that whole area must ensure now there are persons who have the responsibility and capability to secure those firearms. And again, those are the things that can be done to solve the problem. Telling police officers not to attend court, and politicians say that all police officers should just walk into the court with their firearm as if it is a shooting range. That is unacceptable. And let me add, for anyone who believes that what I'm saying is incorrect, even the Welfare Association, they're fully aware, because if they believe that what they're saying is true, by now the police officers would have simply barged into the courtroom, arrested any civilian security officer from preventing them from performing their duty. But the police officers are very well trained in understanding the law. That is why Mr. Dixon is rightful. He has the rightful concern that something must change, because the present status quo, it puts the police officers in some degree of a back foot, because he knows that you cannot do that, and that is why the police officers have not been able to barge their way in, because he knows that if that happens, the police officer himself may very well be charged or sued. So we can't be just trying to bully our way into a matter. What it requires is a degree of dialogue, and we must look after the well-being and the safety of the police officers. The present status quo needs to change. As I said initially, you can always write to the Chief Justice, say these are the 50 cases we want the officers to carry their firearms. He would approve, which is what he had agreed to when I was Commissioner of Police. Or you can find some holding area for the firearms to be secured, to allow the police officer to secure it, go into the court, and then come back out, so that when he leaves the building, he will still have his firearm. Let me also quickly add, 99% of police officers do not have a firearm 24/7, even though I tried my best to provide that for about 20% of police officers when I was commissioner. So the perception that if the police officer is unarmed, it is putting his life at risk. What do you think is going to happen when he leaves the court and he goes back to the station? He's going to turn in his firearm. So we cannot use that concept that the police officer must have his firearm 24/7. Going into the court, however, in a volatile situation with questionable characters in a court matter, I think it is appropriate. There must be those extenuating circumstances to allow the police officer to carry his firearm.
Let me position now. Let me pivot to the other development. We saw a development over the weekend, and this is one, whether it's police for hire on the books or off the books. So I'm talking here moonlighting and officers who are assigned via the court. The bill was a hefty 100,000 plus for a party in the beatum. That never happened because eventually the same court decided to revoke said license. Why sometimes is the police bill such a high one for certain events? What's the particular metric they use? And more so, in a scenario that took place over the weekend, have you seen is there any precedent, any kind of example in the past where license would have been granted and revoked at the same time? For any
it can very well be. If there becomes intelligence that comes to the attention of the law enforcement agencies and they realize, listen, our initial approval would have stated that you need X amount of police officers for you to get the bar license. They can then say, well, listen, now that information has come to our attention, we think that this can be a threat to national security. They can stop it and they can go back to the court, which is what happened. The present circumstance, however, I think is the more important factor. You can go to the greatest football team in the world, Manchester United, play a game in Old Trafford with 75,000 people and there are about 20 police officers. You can go to see an Elton John concert in Wembley, there will be about 15 police officers. We seem to not understand how to deal with sport security event management. We believe it's an outdated factor because of a law that is stated that for you to get a bar license in the court, the police has to give approval, and for the police to give approval, they will tell you how many police officers must attend that event. And the same thing with fire officers. So that when I was with the national football team, I will go to a FIFA World Cup game against USA with 50,000 people and there will be one fire marshal. Here we will have 100 people in a West Indies Pakistan game in the Oval with about 50 fire officers.
And in that regard, I mean, we have to consider already shortages in officers, resource issues. So when 100 plus officers are assigned to just one event, the question remains, what happens to the rest of the country if there is any particular concern in a said area? Because these officers must come from different stations. Obviously, the event did not happen, but let's say the event went ahead. Why are we still, again, the strength? Is it a money issue? Is it extra duty, people that eat our food? Well, what's the real reason?
Yeah, so that is how it works. In fact, the present Prime Minister, he was very concerned about the same process, and rightly so. Because what was happening then was that police, you have a bill for $174,000. That would be probably about 170 officers being paid $1,000 each, and each person would be paid cash. And it was an unacceptable process where so the person who is hosting the event has to go and find cash from the bank to give to the senior police officer. And then there's always the perception, I'm not saying that it is, next thing you turn up with 100 police officers and the person pockets the other 74 for the other 74 officers who didn't show up because you as a civilian can't tell I want to see only the number of the police officers. So what the Prime Minister did was direct me, and rightly so, to put in you have an account. And then with that now, the person will now pay into that account, and now the officers will be paid directly into their account. That, along with 100 plus things that I put in place, has also been removed. So I think we've gone back to the pay the people cash system, which again opens the window for possible corruption. Having a cash system to be paid police officers. But as I said, the whole concept is totally outdated. Trying to put 170, 200 police officers, and they are now paid. So it is not moonlighting. These are police officers who are performing the duty because the court has mandated that you need X amount of police officers as recommended. So the police officers recommend to the court how many police officers would attend the event.
In terms of the moonlighting, is that, I guess, is it, plain talk bad manners, is it something legal? Are officers bending the rules to do it? Because we have seen people moonlight in groceries, at the bars, where there's roulette machine. We have seen these scenarios. Plain clothes, strap on their shoulder, I mean, you know, they're to nobody, man, just getting paid by the owner of the establishment just to give a particular protection and security and to keep the premises safe. They're doing anything wrong, Gary? Is that anything wrong they're doing?
No, there's a difference with illegal and unethical, but in this situation, it is totally legal because this is something that is approved by the court based on a recommendation by the police. You need X amount of officers to have this event, but you must pay me now. So for you to get approval for an event, I am recommending to the court how many police officers must be paid to me so that you can have an event.
No, I talking more about private business. I talking about like a
all right, so the private. So but this is
like I have a business and I just want an officer to be there with his firearm to just keep the place on.
No, you can't. To start with, if you have a firearm user's license, you cannot use your firearm user's license to be involved in protecting somebody for you to be paid. That FUL is for your own personal security or for your assets or your family. So you cannot be using a FUL to be guarding any place as a private security officer. Two, if you're a police officer, you cannot be using a police weapon in the performance of any private security detail unless you are directed by the Commissioner of Police in a state on behalf of the state. Three, the only time a police officer can be allowed to have that type of approval is if it is you write to the Commissioner of Police stating, listen, on my own free time, I would like to do so and so, and it will give me that approval. But the commissioner hopefully will not grant you that approval using a police firearm or your FUL. So you're going there in the position as a bodyguard, I should say, or a security guard on your own free time, but you cannot do any duty as a police officer outside of your role and function and your roster as a police officer unless you have the requisite approval from the Commissioner of Police.
Gary, thank you for that. We've run out, we're out of time. I would really love to discuss a couple other issues. So probably let's set up another discussion sometime soon. And definitely thanks for coming on as always.
My pleasure.